It is not unusual for kids shows to have strongly disturbing content that often continues to haunt us even years later. But nothing comes close to what Japanese children must have experienced during the airing of a show called Poppy the Performer. At first glance, this just seems like your ordinary kids show. The episodes only last around 4 minutes and there is no overarching plot. Essentially, every episode is a short comedy skit featuring Poppy the Clown and Kodomino the Wolf. It starts off with some innocent mischief, but as the episode progresses, the level of violence and disturbing imagery increases until one of the characters dies or suffers a mental breakdown. However, Poppy the Performer is not a show like Happy Tree Friends. It is not meant to intentionally mislead the audience into believing this is a kids show while having very child-unfriendly content. This is a kids show. It aired on the Japanese satellite television channel Kids Station starting from January 2000 until December 2001. Kids Station specializes in broadcasting anime and cartoon-related material 24 hours a day. Contrary to its name, it does not only broadcast shows meant for children. While during daytime, it does broadcast children-oriented shows like the Pokemon franchise, at nighttime it broadcasts some more adult-oriented shows, like Rosario Vampire. However, Poppy the Performer was aired in the former time slot. You might be wondering how something like this even ever passed the executives. Fortunately for us, the show is not such a big mystery as it might seem. Our story begins with Japanese animation director Ryuji Masuda. He graduated at the Osaka University of Arts and worked sometime for an animation company and a video game company. However, around 1991, he developed an interest in producing a CGI animated show. Luckily for him, around that time Kids Station opened up a 5-minute airing window. Masuda admitted that he had no idea what kind of channel Kids Station was or who the target audience even was. But he was desperate to produce a show and managed to claim the 5-minute airing window thanks to an acquaintance. Unfortunately, the development of the show would not go smoothly. Masuda received a very limited budget that would total to a measly $930 per month. As a result, the creative team behind the show would consist out of only 3 people. Ryuji Masuda, who was the original creator, director, and writer, his wife Wakako Masuda, who was the art director and character design artist, and an unknown CGI animator who was responsible for the models and the animation. A lot of other choices were also made with respect to the small budget and the short production time, which was only 3 months prior to its initial broadcast. Voice actors were out of the question and most scenes would feature only 2 characters at most due to CGI limitations and to avoid animating too many characters at once. The show also takes place in a desert, not for story-related reasons, but because a desert background is the easiest to create in terms of simplicity. The lighting in the scenes was also very rudimentary due to time constraints. Other money-saving measures include Poppy only having 3 fingers instead of 5, reusing scenes or inserting 2D art in between scenes, switching between heavy animated CGI episodes and lightly animated CGI episodes, and so on. These constraints would also heavily influence the story of the show. It was challenging for Masuda to create something that could impress and have a lasting impact in just 4 minutes, especially considering the low budget. Eventually, he settled on the idea of a show that would deal with how surreal that was. He wanted the show to have a childlike innocence as well, and thus Poppy the Performer was born. After the pilot episode got greenlighted, production would move into high gear. The budget would increase as time went on, but I will come back to that later. So, the short development history solves most of the mysteries surrounding the show. Poppy the Performer was intentionally made to be somewhat surreal and purposely deal with themes like death, jealousy, and rage. The simplicity of the show, which is reminiscent of traditional shows made for kids, is mostly due to the constraints they had to work within. Masuda was simply not aware that the show was going to be broadcast to children. But then how exactly did the show get approved for broadcasting? Masuda himself speculates that the one in charge of the approval process was an amateur who had little connection to Kids Station as well. However, he also assumes that if the show was too cruel to broadcast to children, they would have never aired it in the first place. But they did, so Masuda continued working on the show. On the 3rd of January in the year 2000, the show would finally start airing. The show would not be received the way you might expect it to be received. Masuda claims that shortly after the first episode aired, he immediately received praise. He received almost no complaints, and furthermore, based on a questionnaire, it would seem the show was very popular with women, more specifically mothers of young children. Masuda was not that happy about the praise, as he had hoped his show would be more polarizing. Again, he was not aware that his show was mainly being broadcasted to children, and in later episodes, he would sometimes push the boundaries of what is acceptable in order to provoke a stronger reaction. As a result, 2 episodes were considered too controversial to air. The first one was episode 11, Swallower. In this episode, Poppy accidentally impales himself with a sword while trying out the art of sword swallowing. Kadamino attempts to remove the sword by dragging Poppy around in a truck, which results in the now somewhat infamous scene where Poppy's face is literally covered in blood. Out of anger, Poppy eats Kadamino and then kills him by impaling himself with a pole. Yeah, I wonder which straw broke the camel's back in this episode. Apparently this episode did air once before it was banned, and Masuda himself suspects that it was banned because of the sad background music, which was making the episode a bit darker in tone than usual. The second banned episode, which never aired, was episode 27, Knife Game. Masuda actually made this episode for a specific reason. Kids Station was afraid that Poppy's 3 fingers would be perceived as a disability and demanded that he was given 5 fingers instead. However, Masuda did not agree to this and instead showed that Poppy did have 5 fingers, but the gloves of his suit only had 3 sockets. The episode itself is not excessively violent, aside from a hand being cut off and frogs being tortured. What got this episode banned was a fear that children would try to replicate the knife game. Fortunately, the episode would not go missing after being banned and was distributed alongside the other episodes on the DVD release. Regardless, the show would continue to rise in popularity in Japan. Initially, only 13 episodes were planned, but Masuda was asked to also produce a second and third season, bringing the total amount of episodes to 39. Kids Station was very happy with the popularity of Poppy the Performer and would even have shorts in between their other programs promoting the show. They also started actively engaging in its production, which increased the budget, resulting in more characters like Poppy the Clown being added and the episodes increasing in complexity. The aesthetic of the show, however, would mostly remain the same, although it would become more surrealistic as time went on. The Poppy craze did not end there, and merchandise would be produced as well. T-shirts, plushies, figures, and even household items would sell like hotcakes. You could even spot Poppy the Performer booths at Japanese anime conventions around that time. Allegedly, the DVD release also sold 120,000 copies, earning it a Golden Disc Award. Aside from the aforementioned promotional shorts, the show would also have a countdown special, which celebrated New Year 2003 with 10 fan-favorite Poppy the Performer episodes. So throughout this video, I have already mentioned and described several episodes of the show. I don't think it would be beneficial to examine every episode in detail, as the premise of the show is pretty clear at this point. And since the episodes are only 4 minutes long and are easily accessible, you can check them out yourself if you want to. However, I do want to discuss the last episode in detail. As far as violence goes, this episode is pretty tame. but it is certainly one of the most bizarre episodes. The episode is simply titled Face and starts off with Poppy trying to unravel the mystery behind Kodomino's mask. He fails to do so, but the frog manages to catch a glimpse of Kodomino's face. The frog is shocked, and for the first time in the entire series, we hear audible speech, which translates to the face of Kodomino, and later followed up by looks like his mother's. Initially, Kodomino tries to prevent the frog from revealing the follow-up sentence, with the implication being that his mother is possibly a horrible and cruel white wolf. But after being confronted by all the other characters and attempting to swallow the frog, the truth is revealed to all. After the revelation, everyone, and pretty much everything, slowly starts fading away until only Poppy and Kodomino remain, seemingly left in mental distress. And that is the ending. It is very cryptic and the meaning behind it is still unknown. Whether it was a dream or everything happened in their imagination is up to the viewer's interpretation. But obviously, the show can't continue with the circus gone. Nowadays, a lot of people think that Poppy the Performer is an obscure and forgotten piece of media, and I think neither are true. Poppy the Performer was obviously very popular when it first aired, and even now it has not been forgotten about by its original creators. Shortly after the show ended, a manga made by its original creators was serialized in the monthly magazine Z published by Kodansha. The manga itself is unfortunately considered rare and hard to find. Although Masuda has rejected an offer to return for a sequel as recent as in 2017, citing the overproduction of anime as a reason, he still actively engages with the Poppy the Performer fandom by answering questions about the show and the characters on Twitter. Masuda says that he's happy to see that his work had such an impact that even now, more than 10 years later, fans are still making fan art and cosplaying the characters. Masuda and his wife are still planning to release 2 mangas, one of which is a high school parody featuring all of Masuda's characters, and the other one is about a grown-up Poppy and his robot, but the release dates are still unknown due to financial difficulties. Since then, they have also released 2 other shows, Mr. Stain and Funny Pets, which are just as surrealistic as Poppy the Performer, but seemingly don't have the same cult following. One thing is for sure, Poppy the Performer will definitely live on as one of the strangest and most violent kid shows ever made. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Feel free to also leave a comment whether it is nice or criticism, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!